All right, we are live on Facebook.
Okay.
Theoretically, haven't seen it on Facebook yet.
I have a little sign up above in my left corner that says live on Facebook, so I think you are.
Okay, yes, we are live on Facebook. There's already 29 people watching on Facebook. So everybody watching on Facebook, we're going to be starting in just a few minutes. We wanted to get everything set up ahead of time. Rather than being late. We're going to be sharing it with Nature Watchers of Connecticut.
Nice.
There's already 50 people watching on Facebook.
Wow.
All right, I'm gonna do the start webinar. We're not going to get started just yet, but I'm going to start the webinar to allow people in.
Okay.
Lori says hi.
Thanks, Lori, for setting this up.
All right, I have to make sure that you can share your screen here.
I can click that if you'd like.
Yeah, see if you're able to. I believe I said it so panelists can, but.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
All right. Try now. You are now a panelist, should be able to, so. I believe you are a panelist.
Okay.
There we go.
Perfect.
Very good. So we'll just wait a couple of minutes to let everybody come on in. But if you are watching on Facebook or Zoom, this is going to be the Coyotes in Connecticut presentation, and we'll be starting in just a few minutes. So, Rich, would you like to do questions as you go or just save them till the end?
Saving it to the end, Russ.
Okay.
Actually, you can cut in. We'll end up going 2 hours if we do it in the middle.
Yeah. People will be able to comment on Facebook, which you won't be able to see. I'll monitor that and jot down those questions.
Okay.
And then at the end, we'll open it up, and you'll be able to see the ones on Zoom, but I'll try and just combine them and ask you the questions at the end.
Okay, perfect.
So for all of my friends on Facebook, thank you guys for putting up where you're messaging from. I see we've got Winstead, Connecticut, which is one of my old haunts. I went to college there. The first degree was there. We have Virginia, Milford. Thought I saw another state. Westerly, Rhode Island is there. Michigan is back. Of course, Madison. There's a Madison. Brantford. Very cool. Clinton, Illinois. Wallingford. Vermont. Very good. A couple of Guilfords watching on Zoom.
Can you?
Boston.
How many people on Zoom can you count?
On Zoom, we are up to, where'd my number go? 14.
Okay.
We had 55 sign up ahead of time for Zoom.
Okay.
But they're probably still logging in. We are at 70 watching on Facebook Live.
All right.
Ottawa, Canada is watching.
Excellent.
The cool thing is these people watching from all over the country and Canada, they all have coyotes too.
Yeah, they sure do.
Lori said 60 are registered on Zoom for the final count. So.
Okay.
One of these days I will get this all figured out, this Zoom thing. This is still like a learning thing for me. Every week I learn something new about Zoom and Facebook Live and connecting them.
I've talked to people at libraries when I've given talks. They said when they learned it, they had their family attend programs that they ran themselves just to learn how to use it.
Yeah, I did that too. But there's always something that comes up that you weren't ready for. And I have subtitles enabled too. We had some requests for subtitles, so it's pretty accurate. I was reading it a little bit last week, was the first week we used it, and there were a couple of difficult words that it wasn't able to track.
Quite the tool.
Wow. There's a lot of people watching from New York. Do you have friends in New York?
I do. I have Rochester and from outside of Albany.
Manitoba, Canada. So I want to welcome everyone that's on Zoom and Facebook Live, and we're going to be starting in about 5 minutes. Long Island, they have coyotes in Long Island too. I remember visiting, what's the Plum Island?
Yeah.
Lori actually set up a tour for us on Plum Island. And they talked about the coyotes swimming out there, and because of the research that they were doing, they couldn't have any large mammals. So they had to hunt the coyotes as soon as they would get on the island.
I could see them killing all the birds too. All the nesting birds.
Yeah, they didn't say anything about that. So I think now we have every New England state is watching.
That's excellent.
Actually, I don't know if I saw New Hampshire yet, but. Zoom people are still logging in. We're up to, what is it, 25, 26. Wow, they're logging in quickly on Zoom. And we're up to 92 on Facebook Live. So welcome everyone. And again, we're going to be starting in just a couple of more minutes. We'll let everybody, I don't want to start too early for all the people that signed up on Zoom and have not logged in yet. New Hampshire is there. There we go. So all of New England and New York are all here.
That's excellent.
Have you been doing many presentations during this COVID time?
It's picked up since the beginning of the year.
Okay, that's good.
Yep, which I'm happy.
You can see all the nice snow that we have here at Hammonasset today. And we have red crossbills in the park today, a very popular bird with our bird watching contingent here. They're out there going from pine tree to pine tree looking for the red crossbills. All right, I think we're ready to get started. So I'm just going to do a quick intro here. I want to thank everybody that's watching on Facebook Live and on Zoom for all of our Saturday mornings programs here at the Meigs Point Nature Center. You can sign up for the Zoom link at the calendar at meigspointnaturecenter.org. And we've got so many programs, I can't even begin to say them. Lori Shaw has been doing a fantastic job of booking programs. So we're booked through March and working on April, and I've got some ideas for May and June. So Saturdays at 10 o'clock. It's looking like for the rest of the year, the way we're going with booking these. And I know our guest today has several other talks that we're going to probably be working on with him. So please continue to tune in, visit that calendar at meigspointnaturecenter.org and see all of the programs. I want to give a shout out to the Friends of Hammonasset because they're the reason that we're able to do this lecture series. So they're sort of our sponsor, supporter, whatever you want to call them. And I want to give a shout out to my mom today because this is her birthday. So she probably is not going to like that, but we'll just say happy birthday to Mom. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Richard Taylor, who is a master wildlife conservationist. And if anyone is interested in becoming one, you can reach out to the DEEP Wildlife Division stationed out of Sessions Woods. Let them know you're interested. They have limited training and probably even more limited with COVID. But once we're up and running again, they are looking for volunteers. Again, Richard has many different talks about wildlife in Connecticut, and we've already had you talking about, let's see, you did bobcats, and there was another one.
Black bear?
Black bear, that was the other one. So today we're going to learn about coyotes in Connecticut. And why don't I just hand it off to Richard also. If anyone has any questions, you can post them at any time. We'll do them at the end. So on Facebook, put up your questions. I'll jot them down and ask at the end. The same thing in the Zoom chat. So Richard, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Russ. And I'd like to thank Lori Shaw from Friends of Hammonasset for organizing this. It's a wonderful program that you have. But I want to talk today about eastern coyotes. And the eastern coyote is found in Connecticut and New England. But the reason the eastern coyote is here in Connecticut is because the apex predator that once lived here it was eliminated. So we're going to talk quickly about the gray wolf. The gray wolf was in North America, including Connecticut, into the up until the 19th century. And when the European residents of Connecticut and the surrounding states, when they encountered wolves, they saw them as threats to human safety and to livestock, as well as competition for wild game. Of course, when you live off the land, wild game is very important. So the wolves were killed whenever possible, and they either shot them or they poisoned them or trapped them to try to eliminate them. And they even placed bounties on wolves from 1647 till 1808. And then but the final wolf was killed, or the last wolf was killed in Connecticut in 1742. And that was a she wolf, and that was in a cave in Pomfret. And Israel Putnam killed that she wolf. The town of Putnam is named after Israel Putnam. So through direct killing and the changes in the landscape, but also the loss of prey, it created the opportunity for the coyotes to expand westward eastward rather, from the west into Connecticut, into this new territory. Now this next picture, I'm having trouble here forwarding this. Let's see what I can, there we go. This is the wolf den in Pomfret, Connecticut. And it is actually on the list of National Historic Sites. It was placed there in 1985. So if you happen to visit Mashamoquet Brook State Park, you can see this wolf den site. So just wanted to show a picture of that. Now the eastern coyote is known as the Canis latrans, and I'm also going to talk about the different colorings of coyotes in Connecticut, because they range in colors. So this is kind of a blonde colored one. It has some grizzle on the top, and the underside is kind of light colored, but kind of blondish color. Now, Canis latran means barking dog, and the original word coyote came from coyotl, and that was an Aztec root word, and that was used in the Mexican Spanish language. And so the coyote was known as a trickster. They were very smart. So it was originally pronounced coyotl. And the eastern coyote, which is larger than the western coyote and the midwestern coyote, was thought to have bred with gray wolves and dogs, because the size difference is pretty remarkable. Now, if you look at this picture, you'll see it's kind of looks like a lanky German Shepherd, but it's a little more slender. It has a long tapered nozzle, bright yellow eyes, and the tail is always carried low versus a dog. If you see a dog running across the field, usually if the dog is happy, the tail's up in the air. So that's a quick way to discover whether it's a coyote or a dog running in your neighborhood. Now, the colors in Connecticut range from blonde to reddish to charcoal gray. So they really have a big range of colors, and sometimes it's even a blend of colors. Coyotes are 4 feet to 5 feet long, or 48 inches to 60 inches, and that's from the tip of the nose to the tail. And eastern coyotes weigh between 30 and 50 pounds. Typically, the females are smaller. They're around the 30-pound range. The males are in the 50-pound range, and sometimes even larger. Now, in comparison, the western coyotes weigh between 20 and 30 pounds. So that's a huge difference in the size of the coyotes. So this next picture, or next couple pictures, are pictures of taxidermy mounts in Connecticut at Sessions Woods in Burlington. So this is a close-up, and you can see the long snout of the eastern coyote and the bright yellow eyes. There's another shot of that same coyote. And then this is the full mount in a glassed-in case. This is all up at the training center at Sessions Woods in Burlington, Connecticut. Now, as I said, coyotes were not native to Connecticut. So this map will show, if you look at the coloring in the map, the kind of teal colored, the arrows show that the coyotes have expanded in the 1900s to 1930s into Canada, and they've also spread into the mid part of the United States, as well as the eastern, northeast, southeast, that sort of thing. So the westward expansion of the coyote, or the eastward expansion rather, was because the apex predator, the wolf, was no longer found in these areas. Now, there are wolves found there today in some of those parts of the United States, but the expansion that took place in the 1900s and the 1930s, rather in that range, allowed the coyote to spread eastward. Now, the other thing that happened to coyotes is the coyotes also people killed the puma or the cougar, the mountain lion, and that's also another apex predator. Not a lot of mountain lions found around the United States, and especially in the east, as has been done in Connecticut, except for one that was killed in Milford years ago. But the other thing that's happened that has chased the coyotes out of the west is there is a huge farming and ranching lobby in the west, and they pay for the U.S. Fish and Game to kill thousands of coyotes each year. So when the coyotes are being persecuted, they're naturally going to move to new areas because it's not a safe area to live anymore. So that's another reason why they have spread east. Now in Connecticut, they were first spotted in the 1950s, and this is a picture of the first eastern coyote, and it was killed in 1963 in Kensington, Connecticut. Now today, coyotes are found in every town in the state of Connecticut. And because we have such great habitat, they have done very well here. The population has steadily grown, and now they're found again statewide. Now, they've done some DNA samplings of the eastern coyote, and they have confirmed that it does have a small amount of wolf DNA in it. And that probably accounts for the size difference between the western coyotes and the eastern coyotes. Because there are more coyotes and people might not be used to dealing with wildlife, they don't know what to make of them. They don't know if they should be afraid of them, or whether they should be fear, or whether their children should be afraid of them, or whatever the story may be. So it's not uncommon to see every year stories in the newspapers or on the media about coyotes that they're making their way into Connecticut. So this is something we see quite common now. Now, coyotes are also opportunistic and adaptable. If you look at this picture, the top left is kind of a wooded area. Coyotes do well there. Top right in your backyard, you can see a coyote walking up on the wood's edge, and then down in the right corner is the field, or right in your backyard in the city. The coyotes are very adaptable, and they are very enterprising, and they've colonized all of these different habitats in the state of Connecticut. And because we have such great landscape and such great habitat, the coyote population is doing very well in the state. And no matter where you live in Connecticut, there's a good chance there are coyotes in your neighborhood. Now, the coyote ancestors date back millions of years, and they evolved from, they believed from Asia. They made their way probably on frozen ground down toward the western part of the United States, where they settled in the North American plains. But they have been in this country for many, many years. And they've also, another difference with the coyote, unlike the wolf, is they do not rely on a pack to hunt or to survive. They do very well surviving on their own. Now, I'll talk a little bit later about how they do hunt with a pack at certain times, but they pretty much survive on being on small prey, and they scavenge as much as possible. They're also they're not very aggressive animals at all, unless you happen to get into that coyote's territory. And the fighting will take place with a coyote if you walk into their territory. But here's another interesting bit of information. They don't fight over mating rights. The female will make her choice, and the other interested males simply move on. And so the decision is made by the female coyote. Now, coyotes are also very shy and elusive, but they're very intelligent and they're very social. And they live in a family group, and we call that a pack, consisting of the adult male, the female, and the young. And the group usually breaks up in the fall and winter when the young disperse. I'll just quickly read this. And the male and female usually maintain that pair bond for several years. They're also very solitary, and just like a dog, they mark their territory with urine. And they generally hunt alone, and they eat a lot of small rodents, or they scavenge as much as they can, but they're very adaptable. During this time of year when there's snow or when there's heavy snow and the food sources aren't quite available like they are in the spring and the summer, uh, oftentimes you'll see coyotes hunting in a pack, and they're again very intelligent. They'll often set up um, coyotes in the wait, and then they push them toward an ambush point to drop larger prey. Very, very intelligent. So the size of the pack can vary also because it'll have the parents, it'll have this year's pups, and occasionally you'll see last year's pups that have kind of moved on to their own territory, but a lot of times the females stay close to their mother. Uh, so the pack can vary in size. So this is another interesting bit of information. Coyotes can run to 35 to 40 miles an hour. And the interesting thing about this is they have incredible endurance, and they can run down prey for 10 miles, which that isn't, to be able to run after something for 10 miles is truly amazing. They also have excellent sense of smell, hearing, and eyesight, which allows them to locate prey. Now, if you compare, especially in the winter time, the speed of a white-tailed deer, the deer can run, if it's chased and really frightened, up to about 30 miles an hour. And they typically run very quickly to get away from a predator, but they don't have the endurance to run for 10 miles like the coyotes do. So oftentimes the coyotes will simply wear down the larger prey because they have so much endurance. Now, coyotes will capture their prey by attacking from the front, and they bite the necks until they actually bleed out the smaller animals. If a coyote is going to take down a deer, they do it in a group, and typically the larger coyote or the more aggressive one will grab the deer by the throat or by the face, hold it while the other coyotes dispatch the animal. So they're very efficient killers, and they're very good survivalists. They also are very good swimmers. Um, and I understand we have people on the call or actually Russ and I were talking earlier about how there are coyotes on different islands um, off the coast of Connecticut. So they have swam from Long Island or Connecticut out to Plum Island. And so you wouldn't normally find them there, but they are very good swimmers. So they actually swam out to the island. And they also, just like a dog, they pant to regulate their body temperature. Now, this is a great picture. All the pictures taken on the presentation are from Paul J. Fusco, and he works for the Department of Energy Environmental Protection's Wildlife Division. This is a coyote that's about to pounce on a rodent under the snow. So the coyotes can smell the rodent under the snow, and they also get into this position, and their two front paws basically stun the rodent, and then they will eat the rodent from there. So they are very adept at hunting in almost any kinds of conditions. And the other thing, if they don't want to be caught or found, they can smell or see you up to a mile away. So oftentimes you don't see coyotes because if they don't want to be seen, they won't be seen because they're almost like a ghost. They can kind of disappear when they want to. Next thing I want to talk about is Coyote Communications. The coyotes, and this is kind of you can see this is kind of a blondish brown colored coyote. Again, this is another picture from Connecticut, different color than the first one. But coyotes use three distinct calls: a squeak, a distress call, and a howl. And those are called yips, howls, and barks. And the group yip howl is how they promote bonding within their family group. And it also marks the territory. If a coyote howls or barks, that's usually the sign there's an intruder in its territory. And that could be a human being, it could be another coyote, it could be a dog or cat, another animal. But that's how they let their pack know that someone has come into their territory. Now, the howl indicates a disturbance or an agitation in the area, and a barks signals the anger to the intruder. And the interesting thing about coyotes is their howls are very specific to that coyote, and they're similar to humans' voice and can be regulated by pitch, duration, and how quickly the howls and pitches rise and fall. Now, to other coyotes, they hear the yips and howling up to 3 miles away. So it's very easy for them to communicate with each other when they have that good a hearing. And the differences in the yips and howls and barks also exist between the alpha pair and the beta members. The beta members are last year's pups or this year's pups. If you ever hear coyotes kind of barking and howling, usually you'll hear one, and that's always led by the alpha coyotes, and then they lead the chorus, and the responses are from the beta members. So sometimes I live in an area where there are coyotes, and you may hear one coyote howling, and then next thing you know, it sounds like a whole chorus is there in minutes. So that's how they bring the rest of the pack together and again, they're very social animals. Now, this is a great time of year to track coyotes. So here's a picture of coyote tracks in the mud, and you'll see that the tracks show prominent claw marks up at the front. And they also have 4 toe pads along with a larger triangular heel pad. They do have a dew paw, which is a little bit just like your dog does, just a little bit up the leg. And oftentimes, if it's heavier snow, you'll see the dew paw actually puncture the snow. So it looks like they have a 5th paw, or not a 5th paw, but a 5th pad on the foot. If you look at the size of this picture, and compare the eastern coyote to the western coyote, the front paws are larger on both animals. The typical coyote print goes from 2¼ inches to 2¾ inches, and the rear, that's the front, and then the rear about 1¾ to 2�3/8. The eastern coyote can be up to 3½ inches, so there's quite a difference in the size of the eastern coyote paw prints as compared to the western coyotes. Now, the coyote prints, if you see tracks in the snow and you don't know whether it's a dog or whether it's a coyote, oftentimes the coyote tracks are oval in shape and the domestic dogs are more round. So that's a quick way to differentiate the two. Now, coyotes, like just about everything, has predators. And the predators for coyotes in Connecticut and most coyotes is, well, especially Connecticut, is bears. And also the young coyotes, which are pictured here, they can be taken by bobcats, fox, or also great horned owls will prey on young coyotes. Now, the range of the coyote varies, and it says it's 2 to 10 square miles. The 2 square miles are typically in urban areas, and the 10 square miles are out more in the wooded areas where there's not as much prey. And typically, the range depends on the amount of prey that's in the area. If it's a lot of prey, then obviously the range will be smaller. And one thing that's very different with a lot of animals, the male and female raise the pups together. And the average lifespan is 5 to 7 years. Some can live up into the teens if they don't have severe winters in their area and they have great food sources, or they don't have any issues such as diseases. Now, the coyotes are highly territorial, and they actively keep non-family members outside their territory, both individual coyotes and also other family groups. So once they set up a territory, that's their territory. And they defend it through howling, scent marking. They also display aggressive body displays, and they'll also confront any trespassing coyote. They're also very opportunistic feeders. And this is kind of funny. a coyote's favorite food is anything it can chew, and that's almost true. The coyotes are opportunistic omnivores. A lot of people think they primarily eat just meat, but as I'm going to show you here quickly, they will eat just about anything that they can chew. So they feed on what's most readily available, and if a coyote happens to be hit by an automobile, and the biologists do a study on it, they can typically tell what's the most prominent food source in that area. And that's how a lot of the studies are done. This is a typical diet of the coyote. You see small animals, the woodchuck up on the top right, the vole or field mice on the right, bottom right, and the rabbits. That's typically what makes up the bulk of their diet, but they also will eat squirrels and deer. We talked about deer. They will eat fruit, and they'll also eat carrion. So if an animal has died or been killed by another predator, they will scavenge on the carrion. And when available, they'll eat garbage. So they pretty much can adapt to almost anything. Now, this next picture can be disturbing, but this is a picture of a roadkill deer that was probably hit by a car, crawled into the road and off the road and died. And then you can see that it's been scavenged on by coyotes. Also, if a beaver is small enough and the coyote can get a hold of a beaver, they will kill a beaver. But they've done studies on the diet, and they found that a portion of their diet does make up white-tailed deer and beaver, and also roadkill carrion. Now, this picture, if you have pets, is also disturbing. If your pet is less than 25 pounds, they will prey on that pet. And you can see the chickens or the sheep or the turkeys or pigs. If they're small animals and the coyotes can get to them, they will get to them. We'll talk about some things you have to do to make sure that doesn't happen. But again, I'm going to give you some tips a little bit later. But in Connecticut, any unsupervised pets, particularly outdoor cats and small dogs, are vulnerable to coyote attacks. And I'm going to tell you in a few minutes why that happens. Or actually, I'll tell you right now. They're going to the coyote sees a dog coming into their area. They see that as another predator competing for food or competing against their pack. And sometimes they'll just kill them because they see them as competition. If a pair of coyotes is feeding their pups, then more cats and small dogs are taken for food. I heard a story recently from a police officer who was getting calls from pets disappearing from a certain area of the town, and they discovered that there was a huge brush pile where a pack had made their den, and unfortunately there were lots of animal tags in that area. So people that were missing cats and dogs, that coyote pair were killing them and feeding them to their pups. So they're wild animals and they can be dangerous. Now, the other thing you should know is coyotes taking pets are not considered an immediate threat to human safety. Therefore, the wildlife conservation officers and municipal police departments are not authorized to remove the wild animals. So it's up to us as pet owners to make sure we do our best to protect our pets. I talk about eating just about anything. On this picture, you'll see the wild grapes on the left, the acorns up on the top right, and also apples. Coyotes will eat all of these, and so that if there's no fresh meat in the area, there's no mice or rabbits, then and they can find fruit and nuts in the area, then they'll do just fine eating this sort of food. Now they've done a study on the coyote's diet, and about 95% of it is mammalia, which is animals, and 1 to 2% of it are pets. And so that gives you an idea. They typically 98% of the diet is not pets, so they pretty much rely on their natural food. The other 2% is actually pet food, trash, and human food. And sometimes people feed their pets outside or they leave food outside. Not a good idea if there are coyotes in your area. Their preference is for their natural diet, so we have to do our part to make sure that that's what they are eating. Now, during this time of year, from January to March is when you're going to see uh, coyotes starting to pair up for mating season. And they're going to dig a den, and they could dig their own den, but a lot of times if they find a den of a woodchuck or a fox sparrow that's abandoned, they'll simply take over that den. And you can see from this picture, they have recently dug that out a little bit deeper to fit the size of their family. Now, a lot of times people think a coyote den is what you see here, but oftentimes they will form a den in caves or large tree cavities or rock formations or any kind of structure. And I mentioned before, a huge brush pile will also provide a structure for a den. But as long as it has great cover and it has a few small entrances and exits, the coyote will use that for its den. Now, coyotes are exclusively monogamous and they usually live in their nuclear family packs. And as I said before, once the female makes her choice of a mate, the couple will spend 2 to 3 months together during a bonding period. And once the female is pregnant, the gestation period is about 63 days. And you'll see their breed from January to March in Connecticut. The females will remain in the den with the pups until the eyes are open, and that usually takes about 10 to 12 days. And then the pups are born from April to mid-May. And this is another interesting statistic. They have anywhere from 1 to 12 pups. The average in Connecticut is 7, and the pups are weaned at 6 to 8 weeks, and they start to hunt with the parents or even on their own from 8 to 13 weeks. Now, the 1 to 12 pups is a really interesting number because the other things that coyotes have the ability to do is if their numbers are being persecuted, people are hunting or trapping or poisoning them in their area. There was a study done in the West where one female had 19 pups. So the coyotes can determine the size of their population, and if it's dwindling and they feel their species is in trouble, they have the ability to have a huge litter. And I can't imagine a female or male trying to feed 19 pups, but that shows you the ability of them to vary the size of their litter based upon what's going on in the environment around them. Now, the couple, the male and the female coyote, usually they kind of spend their years together, and sometimes they'll break off, but for the most part, they maintain that pair bond for several years. And as a picture of a pup, it grows rapidly, and usually they disperse in the fall or early winter. The males disperse first, and then the females often remain in the pack with the mother, and some males may travel up to 100 miles in search of new territory. So oftentimes the packs will be the last year female pups will kind of stay with the pack. And the other thing that they will do is another interesting thing for their survival. If the alpha female is killed, then a 9-month-old female coyote can actually start to breed where normally they would only breed after 2 years or about 2 years. So if they feel their species is threatened, even the young can go into breeding mode a year early. So it's quite a remarkable animal. Now in Connecticut, our population of coyotes is somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000, and that's an estimate. It's kind of difficult to pin down and count coyotes. They count deer populations through looking at them from planes or drones, but state population is somewhere they estimate between 3,000 and 5,000. Again, Connecticut's a small state, so that's a good sized population of coyotes in the state of Connecticut. Now, Connecticut also has a policy on outreach and education, and they also train nuisance control wildlife officers called NWCOs, and they are used to help control the coyote population if the coyotes become a problem. And Connecticut also has a hunting and trapping season, and it's very specific with very specific dates, and there are rules and licenses that have to be obtained. And in Connecticut, Somewhere between 200 and 400 coyotes are typically taken through trapping or hunting each year. And this next slide is the data from a study that shows this was a 2014 report on complaints from coyotes, or people that called in about coyote complaints. As you see, the largest complaint is sightings. People either report the coyote, they don't know what to make of it, or they don't know what they should be afraid of it, but they call up the Department of Wildlife to report that they saw a coyote in the area. Now, there also are reports of cat attacks, dog attacks. If people have poultry or livestock, coyotes have attacked them. And also, the right thing to do, if people spot a diseased coyote, they will call the wildlife department to dispatch that animal. But also, calls have come up because coyotes have become kind of aggressive and they've approached people. So this is what the complaint pie looks like, and this is what this study was done a few years ago in Connecticut. Now, the best way to avoid having any sort of conflict with coyotes is to make sure that you protect your pets and don't let them run free. Cats should be kept indoors, particularly at night, and small dogs should always be on a leash and under close supervision at all times. As I said before, there are coyotes in just about every town in Connecticut and probably right in your neighborhood. So if you have pets, that you have to protect them that way. Coyotes are very intelligent, and they also watch for human patterns. And what they will do is, and this has been discovered, if you let your small animal out at night to do its business, and there are coyotes in that area, and they know you do that, they will watch for that pattern, and they will wait until you let your cat or dog out to do its business, and then your cat or dog doesn't come back. Because that's how intelligent they are. They actually watch human patterns. So we have to be very careful with that. If you do have pets and you want them to run outside, you can install a kennel or some sort of coyote proof fencing. That's kind of a long-term solution to protect the pets, but you do have to watch your pets if they're smaller pets. And the other thing you can do is, a lot of times people don't know it, but they're actually attracting coyotes by leaving pet food outside. They also will, if a lot of people like to compost, and they will put table scraps in the compost pile, oftentimes the coyotes will eat those scraps. And if you have an orchard, or if you have some fruit trees and the fruit drops to the ground, that also brings in coyotes because they do eat apples and other fruit. So if you know you have coyotes and you know they could potentially cause a problem, it's recommended that you clear the fruit from below the fruit trees. That's just another way to kind of protect that. Now, this particular coyote, you can see this is kind of a reddish colored coyote. He has some sort of a bone in its mouth. But if you see that coyote and you're afraid of it, if you leave it alone, most of the time it'll make its way toward a natural habitat and leave your area. But if you remove those food attractants that bring it in, and the other thing that people do is this time of year, people love to feed birds, which is great. But if you don't clean the bird feeder area, oftentimes that brings in rodents, and then of course that will bring in coyotes. And if you have garbage, if you leave garbage outside, the coyotes will find a way to get to it. And again, pet food, if you leave that outside, they're going to go and eat that. And once they get habituated to that food, they recognize people as being a source of food, and once they're habituated, that becomes a problem. So that's what we want to avoid. Now, normally, as I said before, coyotes are not aggressive unless you go into their territories. But if they have been habituated and they recognize, or they associate you with food, then they can become aggressive. Now, they'll also become very aggressive during whelping season, which is when they're raising their young. And if you have pets, or if you're walking a dog and it happens to be near a coyote's den, a coyote is going to get very aggressive and chase you off because they don't recognize what you're there for. They just see you as a threat to their pups. So a lot of times people don't really understand coyotes, and they don't recognize the beneficial aspects of coyotes on a balance to our ecosystem. And the population of small animals such as rodents could increase out of control without predators like the coyotes. And another story, in the West, there was a town that couldn't stand coyotes, so they took it upon themselves to eliminate every coyote in town, which was quite an effort to kill them all. They either killed them or trapped them. And what they discovered was within 2 to 3 years, the entire town was overrun. It was like an Alfred Hitchcock movie. They were totally overrun with rodents, and they ended up having to bring all kinds of experts in to help get rid of the rodent population, where the coyotes would have done that naturally. So you can't disrupt the balance of nature, and that's what happens if you get rid of the predators. So that's something that you can do is recognize that the coyote does provide a kind of a balance with the predator and the prey species. And oftentimes, if they eat a large animal, they'll feed on that animal several times. But again, a 30 or 50 pound animal is not going to eat a 50-pound animal or a 100-pound deer in one meal. So often, what that does is it provides other animals such as foxes, fishers, crows, or ravens, and even eagles will eat a scavenged animal in the woods. We just had a picture um, shared by the Department of Wildlife where a golden eagle, which are not normally not found in Connecticut, they kind of pass through on occasion, but the golden eagle was pictured feeding on a deer carcass. So the coyotes, when they kill things, they also provide food for other animals in out in the open, around out in nature. Now, Connecticut Department of Wildlife has sheets like this on the screen. They have information sheets on about every wildlife that's found in Connecticut. And if you go online, I'm going to give you the address soon. I'm going to give you a couple of links to get some information. But this also talks about tips on preventing conflicts with coyotes. And rather than you squinting and trying to read that particular slide, I'm going to quickly go over this. So there's a number of things you can do, and there's about 12 things I'm going to cover quickly. One is don't allow your pets to run free. We talked about keeping your cats indoors, particularly at night, or putting up a kennel or a coyote proof fencing. And I'm going to show you a picture of what a coyote proof fencing looks like in a few seconds. Never feed coyotes. And people often like to get really nice pictures. So they put food out because they know they have coyotes. And what they've done is, and when I give talks on bears, on black bears, I said a fed bear is a dead bear. And if you start to feed coyotes, you're going to cause a problem, not only for yourself, but for your neighbors. So please don't do that. And we talked before about feeding, or I talked before about cleaning below your bird feeders. Don't leave pet food outside. Secure the garbage and compost in animal-proof containers. And then again, always walk dogs on a leash. If approached by a coyote while you're walking your dog, keep the dog under control and calmly leave the area. Do not run or turn your back on the coyote. They're very territorial, and many reports are because coyotes feel a dog is a threat to their territory. Also, if you see a coyote and it seems kind of bold, try to frighten it away by making loud noises. Some people even use a kind of a foghorn or air horn. And if it happens to be near your house, and it's during the time when you have your water outside on a hose, that spray the animal in the face, they don't like, and just make a lot of racket and scare the coyote away, so they feel as though they're not wanted. Also, if you see a coyote acting abnormally or exhibiting very strange, bold behavior, that's probably because they've been habituated, and that behavior would be they'll approach people. They'll also attack leash pets, and they even stalk children or chase joggers on bikes. If you see anything like this, contact the Department of Wildlife immediately. Now where I'm just going to cover the last few on this sheet. Teach your children also to recognize coyotes and to go inside, and tell your children don't run if they see a coyote. And if you see them, yell at them, make a lot of racket, but don't run or turn your back, because they'll come after the back of you and nip at your legs. If you have crawl spaces or porches or sheds, make sure you secure those areas because that makes a great place for a den or to the animals to hide. And if you have neighbors, perhaps are doing things that they shouldn't, like feeding coyotes, make sure you educate them on the steps that they should follow. Now, Connecticut does have regulated hunting, and that helps to also remove the problem coyotes. And the reason I'm making that statement is if you have a problem coyote and it's becoming aggressive and becoming a threat to humans, then it's safe to remove them during the hunting and trapping season. If the coyote becomes a real issue where it's actually getting very dangerous, then you'll have to call the Deep Wildlife Division for the information. This next slide has the numbers for that. This should be a very rare occurrence that you'll actually have to call someone in the Department of Wildlife to get rid of a coyote, but it does happen because oftentimes people are feeding coyotes. And then last bullet on the slide, the Wildlife Division will issue a special trapping permit, and those are by the nuisance wildlife control officers to target the coyotes responsible for damage or real public health or safety threats. So the other thing is there was a study one time with a lady that tried to figure out if they could trap the coyote that was causing trouble. And what often happened is because the coyotes are very wily and very smart, they often set out traps to try to trap the offending coyote, and they ended up getting the younger coyotes that had nothing to do with it. So you could end up trapping 3 or 4 coyotes and never actually catching the bold coyote that's causing the problem. So that's something that you should involve the nuisance wildlife control officers to help you with that, because that's really what they're experts at. Now in Connecticut, as I said before, there is a trapping and hunting season in this state, and the hunting season is January 1st through April 26th, and also May 30th through the end of the year. And trapping is very specific that times from the January 1st to March 15th, and then November 6th through the end of the year. And the reason there's a gap in the trapping season is because obviously the coyotes now have young in the den, and they don't want trappers to take away one of the parents and basically could cause the death of the pups. So that's why they have regulations on that. If you wonder what do trappers do with the hides of a coyote, well, they can be sold at auction, and the fur is used to make coats, hats, blankets, and trim for collars and cuffs. And if you want to know what the price of those are, that's a little over $50 was the price a few years ago for a eastern coyote pelt. And for some reason, the western coyote pelts go for about $80. They're a little more expensive, but trappers do make money. They don't make a lot of money with trapping coyotes, but it is allowed, and that is allowed in the state of Connecticut. So there are 3 main options for homeowners to resolve conflicts with coyotes. And the tolerance is what I just kind of went through, and I gave you some advice on things that you can do to prevent coyotes from causing a problem. The other thing is fencing and husbandry practices for those people who have farm animals. Now, the thing you should know is coyotes can jump pretty high, and just like a dog, if you have a fence, they can climb up. If you have a chain link fence, they'll put their paws in the holes of the fence and climb up the fence. And then they'll put their whole paw up on the top of the fence, and then they'll pull themselves up and then into the fenced in area where if you have chickens, they will get the chickens and then climb the fence the same way and get out. And one of the things you can do is you can install a device that looks like this on top of your fences. And the coyote will climb the same fence, gets to the top, puts his paw on the top of this PVC pipe, and it begins to spin. So he can't get a good grip on the fence and ends up not being able to get into the fenced in area. So if you do have pets that are fenced in and you have wildlife or livestock, this is a must in a coyote area, or especially where coyotes are becoming aggressive. And if you decide that you have to remove coyotes, well, then you have to follow the law. And if you do want to remove a coyote, a lot of people will say, I really don't want to kill the coyote, but it's it is causing a problem. So I'd like to have somebody catch it and then move it to somebody else's neighborhood. Well, the state doesn't allow that. So if you decide that it's time for the coyote to go, then you're going to have it lethally removed. And it's against the law to capture and release them. So what ends up happening is you moved an animal to another area, it ends up causing an imbalance to the wildlife in that area. And also you've moved a coyote that's causing trouble into somebody else's backyard. And that's not good for them, because now you're going to have that habituated coyote causing trouble for somebody else. So that's why they don't do that. And this is just spend a little bit of time on if you decide that one has to be removed, again, use a nuisance wildlife control officer. They are specially trained trappers, and they go through a certification program, and they can only trap or hunt the animals during the hunting and trapping seasons, and only by special permit. And then also the next slide I want to share is information on the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection's website. If you go to their wildlife page, there's tons of information. They've got it's amazing what they have there. But also it's information on habitat, wildlife, volunteering, also endangered and threatened species. And you can get a wildlife fact sheet on any wildlife that are found in the state of Connecticut, and the wildlife department does a great job of writing those, and those are in PDF format. So the other presentation, and Russ talked briefly about this, but I've done, you can see in the bottom of the presentation, the master wildlife conservationists like myself do talks on the following subjects. And then we'll go to take a picture of this page, if you would. The steps that I talked about living with eastern coyotes is the first link. The second one is the coyote fact sheet. And the third link is a fantastic website, and it's called wildlifehelp.org/animals. What I did is I put the address in for coyotes. If you go to that website, you can plug in any animal that's causing trouble or it's a pest, and they will tell you steps that you can take to help you deal with that animal that's causing trouble. So it's a great website. And another website that's used is the iNaturalist website. And you can log into that website and you can set up your own access. You have to go set up your own password and get into it. And if you like taking pictures of wildlife and you like to observe other pictures that other people have taken, go to that website. And it not only does it cover Connecticut, you can zoom in on your town, wherever you live, but also it has a whole map of the United States, and you can zoom in on any specific town and look at what sort of observations are in that particular area. So that's another great website to go to. And then now I'll open it up to questions, Russ.
Okay, so before we get into the questions, I want to remind everyone, again, Saturdays at 10 o'clock, there are many programs. You can sign up if you visit the meigspointnaturecenter.org calendar of events. You'll be able to sign up for the program to get the Zoom link. You can also sign up for notifications on the calendar and find out when we have a new program coming up. So like next week, we have diversity, backyard diversity. Richard, you're going to be back, I think, doing fishers. We've got bats, lots of topics coming up. Oh, there it is right there. So also you can see I do Facebook Live programs Tuesday through Friday at 11 o'clock. And also, if you missed any of the presentations, they are on Facebook Live, but then they are stored on our YouTube channel and on the website. So you can watch this again. It'll take a few days, but you'll be able to watch this presentation again at meigspointnaturecenter.org in the virtual learning center. And finally, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, because I'd like to start doing YouTube Live, but I need more subscribers. Okay, so lots of questions. Fortunately, you answered about half of them as you went through, so I appreciate that. One of the questions, you talked about the population. Is there any plan to reduce the population or try and control the population in Connecticut, or does it seem pretty stable at this time?
That's a good question, and that's one of the reasons why they have hunting and trapping in the state that kind of keeps some of the population in check. Unfortunately, a lot of coyotes are killed by automobile traffic because we have a very populated state. So that's another way that some of the population is kept in check. But there's no mass plan to drop that number down any more than it is.
Okay. Another question was, do eagles ever attack coyotes?
Well, it's funny if you look at pictures of eagles. Some people think eagles can carry something that, like an 80-pound deer, put its talons in it and fly away with it. Eagles will chase coyotes away, but they typically can only lift about 4 pounds. So if an eagle is starving and wants to take on a coyote, they certainly are capable to do it. But that's a little bit larger animal than most bald eagles. And we have bald eagles in Connecticut, and occasionally you'll see a golden eagle come through. But for the most part, the bald eagles will go after smaller prey.
There was a question, are there coyotes on Faulkner's Islands? And I know the answer to that is no. It's a very small island with no cover, so there are no residents anyway. They might occasionally visit it. Would a coyote jump in the air to try and catch small birds?
Yeah, I've seen them do that. I've seen them actually come to people's bird feeders. They sneak around the backside, and a bird goes into the feeder, doesn't see the animal there, and as the bird flies away, they jump up after them. It's similar to what a cat does.
I wish I could see that. That's pretty cool. Do they call when they make a kill? I know you talked a lot about their communication.
A lot of people think when the coyotes are doing the yipping and the howling, it's because they've killed something, and that's really not accurate. Because if they kill something, they're going to be excited about it, and you're going to hear some noise when they're killing. But a lot of times, that's not the only reason they're making all that racket. It's usually because it's a bonding, it's like a family gathering when the whole group has been away from each other for quite a while, and then they all get together and they start yipping and howling. But if they kill an animal, they don't make a howling and make an announcement to the world, because oftentimes that brings in other animals.
There are a couple of questions about diseases. First, do they carry rabies?
They do, and it's very rare with coyotes, but there have been rabid coyotes, and that's why one of the things that I put on one of the slides was, if you see the coyote acting very abnormal and very lethargic, contact the wildlife department immediately, or your local police department.
And what about Lyme disease? Does it devastate their population?
I just attended the presentation 2 weeks ago, I think, from Dr. Scott Williams, and he talked about deer, and I think the deer are the big host for ticks, but I don't know where the coyotes fall in that pecking order. I'm not an expert on ticks and coyotes.
I'm guessing that question has to do with some people, their dogs get Lyme disease.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing they're wondering if it has the same effect on coyotes.
I would think so, because coyotes spend a lot of time in the woods and in fields. So.
Yep. So you did talk about putting the Coyote Proof railing across the top of a fence. How high does that fence have to be? Because
6 feet, 6 feet tall.
Okay. And if you happen to stumble upon either a den or a pair of coyotes, what's the best thing? Is it to make noise and move away? You already said don't run, but what should you do?
If you stumble on it and they don't know you're there, it's just best to back up and slowly just get out of the area, because they're going to be very aggressive to defend their pups.
Okay. What about deer bait? Somebody mentions that they put out corn to attract deer. Would this attract coyotes in any way?
I know that dogs eat, dogs will go into cornfields and eat corn. I don't know if coyotes do. I've not heard that, but I imagine they probably do.
Okay. I would think that deer bait could also attract rodents, which would attract
Well, that's
coyotes.
pretty logical, right?
Let's see, we have a couple of questions about trapping. So what types of traps are legal in Connecticut?
I'm not a trapping expert. I know the I'm trying to think of the trap that it's illegal. It's a snare. Snares are not legal in Connecticut, but the leg hold traps I think are used by trappers. But don't quote me on that. I'm not a trapping expert. So if you go to let me just get to that slide. Where is it? This particular booklet that comes out every year, you can even go online to look at that, and that will show you the types of traps that are allowed in the state of Connecticut. So I'm not an expert on that.
Somebody made a comment on Facebook that they have had coyotes raid the corn. Their neighbor had coyotes raid their corn. So how about, do trappers have to notify hikers when they put traps out?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, there are lots of rules and regulations, and I'm seeing a lot of questions about the rules and regulations on trapping. So again, this booklet is going to be your best guide for finding out information about trapping.
I definitely will read this book. So if I get these questions next time, I'll have the answer, but I don't know what they are today.
There are a lot of people commenting that they have had sightings of coyotes, and they want to know, because you talked about reports, should they report every time a coyote is sighted, or when should they call that number to report it?
I would go to the iNaturalist, and I think that deep report, they like you to report on fisher and bobcats because we don't have as many of those in the state, so they like to get reports on where those animals are. But I think they're going more to the iNaturalist for observations, and also it's just a great way for everybody to look at the picture or look at your observation or your question. So a lot of people will weigh in on it.
And we just had someone post a lot of the trapping regulations in Connecticut. If you're watching on Facebook, you can see those on the comments. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I think we've gotten most of the questions. I'm going back through Facebook because I know I missed a few at the end there while I was asking you questions. How about as their habitat changes, what's going to change their population? So if we encroach on wild places, I kind of know the answer to this, will they expand or are they just going to continue to contract?
Well, we talked about before, coyotes are very adaptable to live with people. And if you think about years ago, now we have to have a dog license. And years ago in this state and other states, dogs ran free, and they also ran free in cities and towns. And dogs will eat rodents if they're used to it. That in the cities, dogs will kill mice and rats. And now that dogs are all on leashes and hopefully on leashes and all have licenses, you don't have the population of wild dogs running around like they used to. So that provides a great opportunity for coyotes to go into cities. They could have less than 2 square mile area where they're being fed very well because there's tons of rodents in the cities. And so they are very adaptable, and they will just adjust.
And there is a question about rehabbing. Are coyotes rehabbed if they're injured?
I don't know the answer to that.
I'm pretty sure that in the state of Connecticut, there are no licensed rehabilitators for coyotes at this
I've never
time.
heard of one. Yeah, I've never heard of one.
I don't know about outside Connecticut, and we have a lot of watchers from outside Connecticut. So again, I think we've answered most people's questions. If you're watching this and have a question, you can send us a message and we'll try and get that message. I just saw a question, do they transmit heartworm disease? Do you know about that?
I don't know that one. I imagine if they're a canine, they probably do, but I'm not an expert on those diseases.
All right. Thank you, Richard. This was an excellent presentation, lots of information. And again, you answered most people's questions before we even got to the questions. So that's always the sign of a well-rounded presentation. I hope everybody enjoyed this presentation. Again, we want to shout out the Friends of Hammonasset for presenting it, and the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. I work for them, Richard volunteers for them, and they do have amazing resources on there. So all of these websites, please visit them, and you're going to learn a lot more than what we just presented here. All right, we're getting lots of thumbs up. We had almost 250 people watching, so that's a good presentation. And thank you again, Richard. We are going to be signing off.
Thank you, Russ, and thanks to the team. And thank everyone for attending. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you all. And until next time, this is Ranger Russ signing off from the Meigs Point Nature Center.